This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNealy program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today, I have the excitement because I'm talking to Truth Raider. He is a pretty big Bitcoin advocate and influencer in the crypto space. So I'd like to welcome to the show. How are you today, Truth Raider?
Hey, doing pretty good, Rob.
Well, good. Well, I really do appreciate your time and coming out with us. I know you're really busy. I was having some illness this week, so it kind of was a little hard to get everything scheduled out. But so for some of our audience, which is not 100% crypto focused, tell us a little bit about your background and how you kind of came into the crypto space.
So I've only been in Bitcoin and crypto for about 3 years. I've kind of followed the evolution of it all, though, with the dark web and deep web, and I've followed peer-to-peer networks, everything from back in the day with Napster and LimeWire, FrostWire. I mean, peer-to-peer is something that's not new, and I think a lot of people that have been kind of messing around with this technology, Bitcoin was kind of a natural evolution, and so that's kind of how I knew about Bitcoin since its inception, but really never got into it till about 2017. And now I'm here for the ride.
Well, it's kind of funny. You must be close to my age when you start using words like Napster. I think a lot of these young guys that millennial types won't know what you're talking about, but I do. So just, you don't have to dox yourself or whatever, but what's your main type of occupation?
So right now, working on basically, I'm working with a company. Have you heard of Mining Store? You may not have. It's a Bitcoin mining company based out of Houston, Texas. And then we're basically partnered with them, and our company is based out of Pittsburgh. And right now, our big focus area is we're working on bringing foreign miners into the States, essentially. That's kind of mine and my partner's big play right now, is trying to get a lot of the foreign mining into the United States, because right now we only have about 5% of that entire market in the world. So that's kind of the focus for me and the company I work for, essentially. So
how, as a miner, say I'm a miner and I'm in a foreign country, why would I want to come to the United States to mine? You know, from what I understand, it seems like, other places like China, it's a lot cheaper to get the electricity. What would be the appeal of being a miner in the United States?
So there's a lot of reasons why. It kind of covers the gamut. So you've got regulations are becoming more friendly because of so you kind of got like this merging of. So the reason why Texas makes so much sense is because of the oil and natural gas industry. So you've already got this infrastructure in place in certain places like Texas or Pennsylvania, where we're at, or New York or Washington State, where you've got everything from hydroelectricity to natural gas to existing factories that can scale and do industrial scale Bitcoin mining. Solar is becoming a new play. Wind is becoming a play. And so you already have the companies that basically can go from doing what they do naturally and just saying, hey, we'll also do Bitcoin mining, or we'll provide energy for your Bitcoin miners. So it's kind of like, it's almost like a natural transition for a lot of these energy companies and US-based companies to just say, hey, we're open to providing you lower costs and using our infrastructure to just mine. So that's why you're seeing, like right now, you're not seeing a lot of it in the news. But for example, yesterday, it was in the news, a 1 gigawatt facility is opening in Texas. It's going to be the largest one in North America that's opening. They just started literally 24 hours ago. And then you've got
Wow.
company, 1 gigawatt, which is massive, you know, and then
Like,
you've
it's like
got,
a nuclear power plant.
yeah, it's essentially the scale. That's why basically they took over an old plant that was already being used for within the oil and natural gas industry and just are converting it essentially to do Bitcoin mining, you know, and that's one way that it's going to scale in the US. But additionally, you've got companies moving into Texas and Arizona and different places in California, even they're going to do solar and wind. And then hydro is also going to start growing. So people think that energy is really expensive in the United States, but it really isn't. When you think about the fact that we already have the infrastructure, it's just a matter of the old school miner or the old school energy guys saying, yeah, we'll do Bitcoin too. And that's slowly starting to happen. It's kind of an education thing, you know?
Have you looked at anything up in like Gillette, Wyoming, and the Wyodak mines that are up there by chance as a possible location? I think Peabody Energy is one of the big energy companies up there.
Not Wyoming. We've got a couple places in Iowa, North Dakota, like I mentioned, Pennsylvania, Maine, New York. There's a few places that we're looking to set up shop. But right now, those are usually a little bit smaller in scale, whereas in Texas, you have the access potentially to an unbelievable amount of energy to produce, for these foreign miners. And so most people they're not paying. Most people right now, like if you look at the Bitcoin or crypto space, what is everybody looking at today on November, whatever today is, November 21st? What do people give a shit about right now today?
The price of Bitcoin.
That's it. That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'd say 99% of the people in this space, all they do is follow charts and pay attention to what the price is doing. You know, meanwhile, the 1%, which is the people like the article I mentioned today, which was, a company's dropping $150 million investment into Texas to build a 1 gigawatt Bitcoin mining farm. So on a day where the Bitcoin price dumped, I don't even know what it dumped, 5%, 6% today. I'm not sure, but it wasn't a good day. However, people that have basically vision are saying, you know what? Who cares about short-term price points? Let's look at this as an industry, and I think most of the crypto space is missing the big moves.
So when it comes down to mining with ASICs, the two bottlenecks that keep a lot of people out are one, access to affordable energy that make it profitable, but the other part is the hardware, the miners, and it seems like right now that so much of that equipment is just kind of made by one or two companies. What do you think that effect is on the mining industry? Do you think that's gonna there's gonna be more opportunities for manufacturers to create more competition to bring the price of those ASIC type processors down?
So what you're going to have right now, what's going on right now in the mining equipment sphere is, so everybody in the United States essentially is using Antminer S9s, so that's kind of what the big, the most popular miner out there. But once the halving happens and kind of what's happening right now is everybody's transitioning from the S9 to the S17s, or Canaan's got some new ones coming out, or What's Miner, where you're talking anywhere from 50, 60, 70 terahash, which is just dwarfs the S9. So what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to see an unbelievable amount of S9s on the market that are basically not even useful to mine with. And so the basically the moral of this story is 2019 and early 2020 to mid 2020 is going to wash out most of the private personal miners. Most of these guys are going to get washed out because of energy prices, as well as hash rate increases within these pools. And so profits are going to go down. So really what you're going to see is like what I just told you, a 1 gigawatt mining farm opening with an ungodly amount of miners, that are going to go into that facility. You're going to see more of that in the States. You're going to probably every couple of weeks, or if not every month or so, you're going to see a story that says, hey, we just built a 500 megawatt facility. Here's a gigawatt facility. Here's some major companies that are coming in. So what you're seeing is all of these small scale miners are going to get washed out, and it's going to be an institutional and a corporate play when it comes to Bitcoin mining. I think that's what I see.
Do you think that's a good thing for Bitcoin?
I think
like
it is.
From a centralization kind of point of view?
I think it, if you're talking, I think it is potentially if if US and North American companies get on board. If it's just Chinese miners moving to the United States, then it's a centralized play, because what they're doing is just gaining more access to cheap energy. But if you start seeing European and American companies and North American companies saying, hey, this is a smart idea, why don't we set up shop and do our own thing? Then I think it's a good thing, and it decentralizes the mining space. But the problem is that China makes 100% of hardware right now.
Right.
That's the issue. That the overarching issue is we really need like a Germany or somebody who's really good at technical manufacturing, at an industrial scale. We need like a Germany to come online and make a version of ASICs miners, or some other country to make hardware. That's what we need.
That's one thing I haven't figured out is I can see power plants that have excess capacity and things. You go talk to the guys with the tall hats and you just give them a spreadsheet and a chart, and they can make the connections, right, and see the opportunity. It doesn't make sense to me. I guess I don't understand enough about chip manufacturing. It seems like there should be a lot of opportunity in the hardware space that other companies have popped up to do that. And, is it just that the chip manufacturers that there's, is there nobody in the United States that can even make a chip? Is that kind of the issue with that right now?
I think it's a matter of scale. So there's a city in China called Shenzhen, and I probably butchered the name.
Sounds good to me.
So basically, this city is a very good example of the way China does business. Is they're out to just mass produce everything at scale. So for example, Bitmain is like, everybody knows Bitmain's like the big player, right? Mm-hmm. Well, a competitor that's up and coming is a company called Canaan, right? Who they just did an IPO for like $100+ million in the States. But they're going to compete very, very heavily with Bitmain. But the thing is, Canaan has the same business model as Bitmain. It's just mass produce and mass mine Bitcoin. It's a very simple model. It's not a very innovative model as far as the industry goes, but that's why you don't see American or European companies competing with them. Is, for example, like I said with the Antminers, like they had the S9, now they're going to have the S17. They're just looking for new ways to increase the hash rate for mining. And basically what it does is they're able to mass produce those devices, that hardware, and no American or European company can keep up with the pace. That's the overarching issue. And I don't see it changing, to be perfectly honest, on the hardware front. On the mining front, I think we can catch up. Or we can bridge the gap. We can't catch up, but we can close the gap.
For that location down in Texas, how many how many actual miners are going to be running in a facility like that with a gigawatt of power?
I'm not sure. You look at, for example, we're working with a company that's trying to fulfill. I think it's 4,000 T17 miners. And that's about 10 megawatts, so for about 4,000. So, do the math on on what it takes to get you to a gigawatt. It's a shitload of miners, like it's a lot. So
I was at World CryptoCon in Vegas a couple weeks ago, and they had, the whole mining area down there. And there's some innovative stuff from the standpoint of cooling and keeping the packs of miners, the racks, like really more tight together. So they figured out different ways of cooling, and there were some interesting efficiencies that they could probably gain, with the cooling side of things as well. So the question I have, the halvening, that's, you're hearing about this a lot, and, everybody's got a different opinion about it, what it's going to do to the price. And my concern has been, you can't necessarily say that Bitcoin's going to do what it did 4 years ago, because the entire crypto universe is very, very different now. The market's very different now. The regulations are very different now. There's thousands of new projects that came and went and are still in operation now. So, past performance is not always indicative of future, results. But the question is, a lot of people do think that Bitcoin's going to pump and everybody's going to get excited about the halvening. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you think people is it going to pump, or do you think it's just going to happen?
My personal opinion is that, so I talked to a lot of people on Twitter, just going back and forth on predictions and stuff. So like for me, I think Bitcoin at $10,000 is an amazing price. Like it's a stable price. Whether it goes from 10,000 to 100,000 or 50 or whatever the number is, 10,000 is a psychological number. When people, that are out there in the space say, how much is Bitcoin, right? And you tell them it's 10K, they're just like, what? It blows their mind. They don't understand that. Because what's the price of a physical, of gold? The gold spot price, it's nothing. So I think it's a psychological game. So when the block halvening happens and it goes down to 6.25, essentially, I don't think that's going to create a bull run. I think we're still going to be in a bear market until probably the end of 2021, maybe somewhere in there. I mean, we may go up, we made 2 or 3x the price. But I don't think I personally don't think the real bull market starts until you have things like ETFs that are open. Like you've got multiple ETFs out there. You've got multiple institutions that are trading, that are using Bitcoin openly. And I think we're still like 2 years away from even the beginning of that, from my opinion. So that's why I think end of 2021 probably is more realistic for a lot of these companies to onboard into Bitcoin. Right now, nobody knows about Bitcoin. You ask 10 people, if you go up in the street or to a university and you ask 10 people, what is Bitcoin and what does it do? You're going to get probably 9 out of 10 people are going to stare at you like you're crazy.
I play that game actually, and my results have been very different. Everybody I ask has heard the word Bitcoin. They don't get it, like what it is. They think they understand internet money. That's about where the extent of it. But the name recognition I find is pretty prevalent among the people that I talk to. Now, their opinion of it is they don't understand it, or there's a negative connotation with it being scammy or a ripoff. That's kind of what I'm seeing out there.
I agree with you. I agree with you that they all have heard of it. But there's a difference, I think, between like I played poker with 12 of my buddies. I as an experiment, I asked them that question. Hey guys, you guys know about Bitcoin? Like, yeah, we all heard about it. We saw it on TV. That's a huge difference from I understand what it does, what the functionality of Bitcoin is, as well as how do you physically use it. Like that is a huge educational gap for probably 95% of the people in the U.S. I would say.
Try explaining a decentralized organization to someone on the street. That's a little more complicated.
or even not even trying to explain the core about Bitcoin, but just how do you physically use it? How do you physically transfer Bitcoin? Most people would look at you like you're crazy, even if you just said what I just said. How do you transfer Bitcoin from one person to the next? Show me how to do it.
What I kind of tell people, when it comes to crypto, I always kind of put myself in the person's mind, right? And with our project, I actually am out there talking and doing sales already with our project, and I'm in retail stores talking to retailers. In fact, we started talking to retailers before we coded anything, because we built it for a purpose. And what I explain when it comes to crypto is like it's like Cash App or Venmo, but it doesn't use dollars as the underlying value. And they're like, oh, I get that. And then when I say, there's no corporation, it's the decentralized project. What I have found is that if you say it's kind of like a nonprofit that's built to run this project, and people they can wrap their head around that. Now I know it's not technically a nonprofit because that's a corporation too, but if you say it like that, that there's no corporation, but it's more like a nonprofit group that runs this, people can make sense of that, I think. And that seems to work pretty well when I talk to people.
Well, and if you try to break it down in its core, right, Bitcoin is software. Like and how do you explain the fact that Bitcoin is software? Like that, literally that's what it is. I mean, it's only money because we've monetized it, but it essentially is just a software that's constantly running. And so nobody's ever going to understand that, because then you start getting deeper and deeper into how does it work, and then you start talking about blocks. I mean, try explaining blocks to somebody on the street.
I don't know if I can explain that myself half the time, but here's the thing is that try to explain how settlement happens on Swift with debit cards. Nobody knows. They use their debit card. They know how it works. They know that it works. They trust that it works. They have faith that it'll work. I don't think the average person, this is, I think where, engineers kind of ruin everything, is that engineers, the build it, they will come mindset doesn't work. And I'm not picking on engineers. I've worked around engineers my entire professional life. So I love engineers, but you don't want the engineer in charge of marketing either. But what you find is that people, engineer types really want to they're really excited and geeked out about the technology or the features, the kind of thing. Whereas people don't care about features as much as they do about benefits. If this solves a problem for me, show me how it solves my problem. And that's all they care about. When I start talking to retailers, and that's my focus is talking to retailers and getting them onboarded into crypto, they want to know how do I deal with taxes? How does it integrate with my point of sale? And how easy is it to work? And is it safe? That's what they want to know. They don't care about servers and miners and block producers and whatever else. They don't give a shit. They don't even want to know because it doesn't matter to them. They want to know that they can cash out. Is there, how volatile, a lot of the retailers I talk to, they are concerned about volatility. Well, it goes up and down. Well, then you cash out quick. You just don't sit on it if you don't want to. But I think that's the thing. People get lost. They get lost into the technology. And the average person, if you're trying to say adoption won't happen until the average person understands finance, economics, the Federal Reserve System, inflation, and fiat money, and you have to educate the entire planet on those things, and that's when adoption, you're never going to get adoption. It'll never happen. One, most people don't give a shit. and people don't give a shit until they have a problem, a recognized problem. And I think that's why I think like a lot of people, they're struggling to get adoption because they still think like, oh, people need to come up in this level of knowledge. And I don't think they do. I don't think they need to come up with that for there to be adoption. Crypto just needs to be, I'm sorry.
No, I agree completely. You're 100% right. I mean, the problem that a lot of us get sucked into, myself included, is, because the more I research Bitcoin, the more I study it, the more I try to educate myself, you fall into a trap of over-explaining the simplicity of it. And it's a natural thing because you're so interested in how it works. So you tend to so I think the way it works in a very simple manner is like to try to explain to somebody is, I guess, it's like Western Union or PayPal without the third party involved. So you're sending your currency to another person without the third party, but it's very similar to PayPal, except for you don't need a bank to settle the payment. It's just a direct payment between you and another human being, without that third party. And I think because people know how PayPal works, you got your email, you send it to somebody else's email, and somehow magically the banking system settles it.
Right.
it's the same as PayPal without the banking system. I mean, essentially.
And I think even going that deep is probably unnecessary.
Yeah,
Those are interesting stories. So my day job, a long time ago, I used to be a contractor. And I don't hide this, I'm very public about my, I have a real day job company. I'm an entrepreneur and I have a day job and I have our crypto project. So I don't hide it on my LinkedIn, whatever. I'm totally doxxed. But, I found this is probably 15 years ago, when I first started getting into sales of my business, I would try to educate my clients on everything they needed to know to make the best buying decision. And my average sales time with these people are 45 minutes to an hour. And I call people back like a week later and they're like, oh, I went with somebody else, but thank you. I loved your presentation. What do you mean? Why didn't you go with me? Well, they were cheaper than you. And what I found, and I was over explaining what I was doing, is I was doing my job and giving them everything they needed to know to make a really informed decision and be really smart about it, because I wanted them to be smart. And what ended up happening is I wasn't closing sales. So what I ended up doing, I found out, is I cut my sales pitch, to half the time, to a half hour, and I doubled my sales. And true story. And it was hard for me to wrap my head around it, because I was trying to educate people in a way that I wanted to be sold, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is, most, and I find this especially with guys that are smart, and most of the people that I know that are in crypto are smart. Okay. They're curious, they're smart, they're questioning, I haven't run into too many stupid people in crypto, at least that are working in crypto. And so as smart people, we want to have respect for other people's intelligence. I think where we're like, hey, I think you're a good person and I want to treat you with respect and I want to value your intelligence. So you too must want to have this knowledge. But I don't think the average person does. I think you lose them. I think it gets complicated. And I think if, you have to recognize that there are different people have different, they kind of perceive the world differently. They have different views of the world. And the average person has an average IQ. So when you're smart, right? I mean, that's not mean.
Yeah.
That's not mean.
True.
But that means, in the United States, right? The average IQ in the US is about 100. Okay.
Yeah.
That means half the people you run into at Walmart or at the mall or at the bank have a below average IQ. That's how averages work, So you got to, I don't mean to dumb it down, but you got to explain things in a way that makes sense to them. And I always say, you have to sell people in a way that they want to be sold. Don't sell people on how you think you should be sold. And I found that made a big difference in my success in business, is that you just have to kind of evaluate who you're dealing with and make it make sense for them. And that's not insulting. It's just, if you try, I mean, think of it this way, right? I can tell you're a smart guy, and I read your Twitter, so I know you're a pretty smart guy. If you go in as a smart guy to someone who maybe is just average, and you try to explain all this technical engineering kind of mumbo jumbo, how they might take that as you think you know it all, right? I mean, that happens. Or if they're a woman, maybe now you're mansplaining. There's all these kind of, and as a smart guy, you're like, no, I don't think like that. I'm not mansplaining, and I don't think I'm the smartest guy in the room. I just am excited about this. And I think that's where a lot of guys in crypto miss it, because they have a hard time with that. And I have a hard time with it too. But I think that, as we're trying to get adoption, we just need to be cognizant of the world is not who we are typically, and we're pioneers, right? People like our thought leaders, they're early adopters. Early adopters are different than average people. Most people aren't early adopters. Or the early adopters wouldn't be a thing, right?
And I agree with everything you're saying, man. And it's hard for me. Like I said, I got in 2017, so it's really hard for me to look at myself as an early adopter per se. I mean, because I came in years and years after all these guys. But then, like you're saying, I'm not an early adopter, but I got into it fairly early, essentially, because when you talk to people about Bitcoin, they're so lost in just the basics of it. So yeah, I'm very new. I've only been in it for 3 years. I'm fairly new. However, there's a huge knowledge gap between somebody that's never touched Bitcoin and somebody that's been using it for a while. So when I was in Malta a couple of weeks ago, and I was on a panel for talking about Libra and Lightning and DAOs and stuff, and I basically was defending Lightning. And so I was looking back at some of the clips of when I was talking, and I was like, probably in that room, in that conference room, there was probably like 6 dudes that understood what the hell I was talking about. The rest of them were all just like, yeah, Lightning sounds like it's a good thing. Because I was basically defending Lightning because I'm a huge fan of Lightning, essentially. But at the end of the day, like you said, people just want to know that Lightning either works or it doesn't work. That's really that's the crux of it. And so I think sometimes people like me and other people that really want to defend it, we get so caught up in the logistics of it all, you know? So
well, it's interesting because, you know, I'm not here just pushing what I'm doing, but, you know, I'm working on a crypto project that's not Bitcoin. Yeah. And a lot of maximalists, and I'm not a maxi, though, just so for all transparency, the 4 main projects that I have personal investments in are Bitcoin, Ethereum, Raven, and Tusk, which is my project. So I am an investor in all those projects. So understand, I'm not here hating on anybody. But, you know, when we started our project 2 years ago, I mean, Lightning was still much earlier on. And, you know, everybody's like, because as a project, you're in the mining side, but, you know, I've been as a project for a couple of years almost. And you wouldn't believe the hate that you get for being a project from the maxis and the different communities. It's pretty awful at times. And one of the persons said, why don't you just do what you're doing on Bitcoin? And I said, well, Bitcoin's not designed for retail. Never was. And 10-minute block times doesn't work. And
I agree. The current format, you're right. Yeah.
You know, Bitcoin Cash, and again, I am not political. I'm not in any of those communities at all. But Bitcoin Cash is actually would be better for a retail environment than Bitcoin. Core is just not there. And so, but I said this, and someone said, well, what about Lightning? And I said, well, and this was about 8 weeks ago on the Lightning Twitter timeline. And this is just like 8 weeks ago from now, right? They posted on the Lightning Network timeline on Twitter, do not put any more money into the Lightning Network. It's still software, could be buggy, and don't put any more money into the Lightning Network that you're not willing to lose. And that was on their own Twitter account. It's still there. And I pointed out to this guy, I go, okay, well, if I'm going in and talking to a retailer and I'm trying to solve a problem with crypto, whether it's mine or someone else's, I certainly can't go and tell them to do Lightning when that's what's on Lightning's Twitter timeline just a few weeks ago. That tells me that it's not ready for prime time even yet. And
yeah, and that was my argument in Malta. I mean, I argued that what you just said, it's still in beta. You know, it's like it's fucking I argue that it can be something amazing. I don't argue that it is.
Exactly.
It's experimental right now.
You know, and so much of crypto is experimental. Yeah. And this is what I tell people, you know, and I'm kind of agnostic. I'm not, it's funny because even with my, you know, podcast here, I interview all sorts of projects in crypto. And it's not, even though I got my own project, you know, I'm here, I want to talk to other people because I'm excited about the space. And in my happy world, I don't believe there will be, nor should there be just one crypto for the planet. I think that's actually dangerous, inherently centralizing. And to me, it's like there will be multiple cryptos. And in fact, I would rather there be 200. This is my own, you know, ideal place. There's 200 really, really well-designed communities around 200 different blockchains that all seamlessly coexist and atomic swap between one another. To me, I think that's actually much safer than having, like, you know, fewer and fewer crypto projects that are more and more centralized behind them. And to me, I think that long term, that would actually be better for society, because of the beauty of what I see as crypto is that, you know, we talk about the honesty and the transparency and the scarcity and, you know, and the inflation rates that are known, and the open source nature of crypto makes them superior to fiat, right? They're not necessarily subject to a government's politicians' whims. But what I see is that the other benefit of cryptos is that you can tailor them and program them for specific purposes regions, industries, companies. And we don't talk about that enough, that there could be, and maybe there should be, a crypto for the shipping industry. Maybe there should be a crypto, and you're starting to see more of that. But I don't think we talk about that enough, and because there's so, I mean, you're out there probably more than I am, but it seems like a lot of these projects are really trying to like, oh, our project is the greatest, and we hate that community over there, and they fight, and it's all stupid. And I'm like, look, there's no reason why Bitcoin can't be one thing, and this other crypto project could do this other one thing, and they could work together on that. And to me, the ultimate goal is to decentralize and free people from the state as much as possible. What do you think about, the idea of that, there can be cryptos for specific purposes in industries?
Well, I mean, I'm very extremely libertarian. So, I mean, I'm all about the decentralized approach. I mean, I don't disagree. And I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm a Bitcoin realist. Like in the fact that I'm a firm supporter of Bitcoin, I will be now, and I'll probably be 20 years from now, just because it has its place. However, I agree with you. As a realist, let's say Lightning becomes amazing. It's the greatest thing ever. Okay, well, that probably only, let's say it does, just as a use case. Mm-hmm. That would only solve a problem of speed, right? Because what Lightning promises is millions, if not billions, of transactions and capability. Okay, let's say that happens. Well, I guarantee if Lightning can do that, there will be 100 other cryptos that figure out how to do the exact same thing and to move really quick and move really secure. So I agree with you. There will probably be a blockchain project that does really well in the medical arena. That's really good with medical blockchain and a shipping blockchain and a aviation blockchain and you name it. There's probably going to be another blockchain that's better, even if Lightning succeeds or fails. There will be something better that does a specific task: retail, manufacturing, real estate. I mean, there's probably going to be, like you said, hundreds of them that are really good at doing something that's very specified. And meanwhile, Bitcoin's going to be sitting on the shelf just saying, hey, keep it up, guys, keep going, as a store of value and possibly a transactional crypto with Lightning. But I think even if Lightning succeeds, we're going to have everything you just mentioned, hundreds of blockchains with a purpose,
And we already have an analog for that, right? If you think about it, I mean, pretty much every government has in the world, every country, every government has its own fiat. There's 150 or whatever, how many countries there are, and they technically seamlessly swap between one another. We already have an analog for that. Yeah, and if you think about it, that makes sense, right? People are, so you can say, look, well, the United States has a coin, right? Switzerland has their coin or currency, and then they trade, and you can go at any airport and swap between one another. And you explain, oh, well, okay, that makes sense. So, I mean, there's lots of ways that, when you're talking to the average person, you can explain these concepts in a way that they might be familiar with, and say, look, there's, hundreds of currencies around the world, and they all talk to each other. And really crypto's like that, but just more in a digital format, and you take out the middlemen. And they're like, oh, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I like that future better. I think a lot of maximalists and especially the old school guys, and I used to be very active, actual big L libertarian politics. And one of the things that I find with being an ANCAP or being a libertarian is that whenever you get around activists of any ilk, they tend to be the roughest around the edges. You know what I'm saying? Is the earliest activists, the ones that really are the ones that spend years getting the ball rolling and making stuff happen and promoting it. Those guys do necessary work, right? That's how these movements start. But as these movements change and get more mature, different people come in, and in some ways usually take over. The ones that have better social skills, they have the ability to see things through. And I think maximalists in a lot of cases tend to be those guys, the earliest activists. So, there's a saying that I've heard that I like that says, pioneers take the arrows and settlers take the land. I don't know if you've ever heard it. And I think that makes something like that. Yeah, and I think that's pretty true with all these the cannabis industries like that too. It's like I was pretty involved in politics in Colorado, especially during 10 years ago when they were getting it all medical and then legal for recreational use. And it's interesting because the earliest people that were pushing it were literally the stereotypical hippies, dude, all the free of the weed, those kind of guys. And now you go to Colorado, and in that industry, and it's funny because the regulations in a lot of ways pushed all those guys out too anyways. One of the interesting things in Colorado with that is that you couldn't get a license to work in any marijuana or cannabis related business if you'd ever been busted for drugs.
Seriously.
Yeah. And so think about that, right? Everybody who was in that industry was busted for drugs. That's why they're in the industry.
Yeah, they got into it because they wanted to try to find a way to get legal after all the drama.
And so it's interesting, but if you go to Colorado now, it's still kind of an edgy industry, but it's very much corporate, and it's gotten a lot more mature, and you're dealing, you still, it's edgy, like crypto's still edgy. Even the guys that are corporate-y, that came out of traditional finance, they're still the edgelords of traditional finance that are kind of showing up at the conferences, right? They're the ones that are like, I'll still wear a suit, but I'm gonna not wear a tie. That's edgy for them. But I think that's going to happen in crypto too. And I think eventually 5 years, 10 years from now, no one's going to know who most of the maximalists are. They won't remember them because they're going to be so, this is just because I see this with other political and paradigm movements, is that those early activists generally get washed out in the noise once things take off. And so I try not to take those guys too seriously, but I think they still performed a really important thing, and I totally have kudos and shout outs and respects to those guys because they did something important. But they also can be their own worst enemy as well. I always say you're a retailer, and I always kind of looking at it from the retailer standpoint, and I owned a retail store before, so I know a lot about retail. And say I want to accept Bitcoin into my business. Well, where do you start? Crypto Twitter, right? Now, if you're, the business owner, you're not maybe super technical, but you want to try something new, you're frustrated with, Visa screwing you over, whatever, and you go land on crypto Twitter or Bitcoin Talk or somewhere else, and you run into maximalists, and you have a question about, well, this BCH looks interesting. It's faster than Bitcoin Core. What do you think about that? What do you think the response is to that poor retailer trying to learn? And put all those questions, and they're going to run away because
they're gonna get nuked by 100 trolls getting all pissed off that they're talking about it.
Yeah, and so to me, that is actually, in my opinion, one of the impediments right now of crypto is that I think in some ways it's its own worst enemy, and it bums me out because I saw it too. And people was like, oh, you're going to do this project. I'm like, oh, you're a scam. What? I didn't sell anything. I didn't ICO. How am I a scam? I don't hide who I am, but it's pretty funny. So I follow your Twitter, and that's how I actually found out about you originally. And you got a pretty big following on Twitter. How did you get such a big following? What'd you do?
So I started doing a lot of, like I said, I used to be big into libertarian type conversation. Back in the day, and I started my account in 2015. Used to do more libertarian political type. Like I'm a pro gun guy. I got a shitload of guns. I used to be an FFL dealer back in the day.
Nice.
So like I kind of was on that, on the 2A spectrum, libertarian guy, that whole area, and it kind of has its place in Twitter, and then it kind of that I kind of just moved into crypto because it was a natural progression. I think there's a lot of people like me in that way, libertarian guys that were looking for something that was part of that. It was, I don't know. It fits into the mold really well. The whole decentralization and libertarian kind of, if you believe in both of those, they kind of go together a little bit, I would say.
Well, I agree. It's funny that you bring up the gun thing because I don't know if you know what we're doing with Tusk, but we are focused on the gun industry. with our project. And then, so it's funny because I spend more time in gun related conferences than crypto conferences. And I'm the only guy there talking about crypto because there's no one from the Bitcoin company or the Bitcoin project at gun things. It's kind of funny, but you would be surprised, because the gun industry has a really big problem with payments, a really recognized problem. And I always say this is that for adoption to happen, you need to focus on industries that have recognized problems. If you try to tell grandma that she needs to go use Bitcoin to buy something at Joann Fabrics, and then, oh, by the way, it's going to take maybe an hour or two for that to confirm. Oh, by the way, it's really complicated. Oh, and it's expensive too. That makes zero sense that for grandma to do that. You're creating a lot more work and trouble, and you're going to stress your poor grandmother out. But on the other hand, if you go talk to a gun retailer, who the fact is they're completely barred because of politics from using PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, coin payments, token pay, bit payments, or any of the other type of digital payment processing things, and you talk about crypto, you would be surprised at how open they are to that concept of not getting their business shut down and being able to conduct business online. And to me, there's 7 industries that have a recognized problem in the United States right now with traditional payments, and they're all distasteful to somebody. And I have to point that out. So, and those are things like cannabis and guns and pornography and prostitution and gambling and pawn shops and refugees and immigrants. And those are the industries right now that have a problem. And to me, if your focus is on payments, which is what our focus is, you need to focus on those industries, because those are the places that actually have an issue and they have a problem that needs to be solved that crypto does solve. And so far, we've had amazing response going and educating retailers. In fact, we got 15 retailers now that have already given us a verbal as soon as our first payment gateway is done that they're going to accept Tusk for payments. And so we're already real excited about this industry, and 2020 is going to be a really big year for us. So we're pretty stoked. But, even if you're in another project, the main thing is, if it doesn't matter, I mean, you need to focus. If you're trying to sell something to somebody, you need to sell something to somebody, whether it's crypto or anything else, that has a problem, and solve their problem. And I think a lot of these guys are like trying, especially engineers tend to fall into this build it and they will come mindset. And that's a myth. Build it and they will come does not. And, it's great if you have an idea that, technologically might be amazing. But if you don't have a plan and a way to put that solution to someone's problem in front of the people who have that problem, I don't think you're going to get very far. And I think that's what a lot of crypto people run into. But then again, most of the crypto people, I think about it, most of the crypto projects are led by developers. And there's a huge, at least what I've seen with developers in general, is there's a huge bias against sales and marketing people in general. They just don't like sales and marketing. And I think that's part of the culture. Developers are often introverted, and it's not a bad thing. Our team's like the same way. I'm the guy with the big mouth. So, but I think if people started opening their mind a little bit about what they're trying to accomplish as far as getting adoption, if adoption is, on the horizon, you got to focus on solving people's problems, and then you got to figure out a way how to get that problem, solved for those people and put that in front of them. And that's how you win. And if you're not doing that, then I don't know how it makes sense to me that there's not a lot of adoption yet, is because people aren't really doing that. You go look at the big projects out there and go look at their team pages, the ones that actually have teams, and you will see, you might see a bunch of developers, but you really don't see a whole lot in the way of the sales and marketing piece, especially when you're talking global projects where you might need a sales leader for every country, if you're really trying to get adoption. I mean, that's what it might take. But you don't really see that being built out that way. So where do you think the future is going to be? If, say I'm new, I'm coming into crypto, I want to get excited, I want to be a part of it. How would you recommend the average person who's new to crypto to kind of get started and get their feet wet with this kind of industry?
I would say if you don't know anything about it, just go to Robinhood or Coinbase or an ATM and just buy some Bitcoin and just try it out. Just test it. I mean, I think that's step one. Is most people don't know about that. Most people think it's really complicated to access Bitcoin. So
Mhm.
I would say step one is if you know somebody that knows about it, just go get some. And that creates like a spark. So like my first, the first Bitcoin I ever got was in Jacksonville, Florida at a Charlie Shrem ATM at a gas station. That was my first gateway. And it was because I just was doing a shitload of research. I watch a lot of documentaries. I love documentaries, and I was just going through tons of them, and it kept popping up as a theme. So I was like, I'll go try this out. Let me just see what this thing's all about. Like I knew what it was. I knew it was used in the dark web with Silk Road. I knew I had seen it on the dark web and the deep web. I'd seen, people buying stuff. I never used it specifically, but I was super curious. And so finally I was like, you know what, let me just go to an ATM and buy it. And I did. And then you kind of go down a rabbit hole. Like you started a project.
Mhm.
You started a company, you started a project based on just that initial, like, hey, I think we have something here, with crypto. And I think that's kind of what all of us, we kind of went down that rabbit hole, and now we're here, and it's an interesting ride because it makes sense, at least to me. It really does,
It made sense to me too, and that's why I tell people I'm more bullish on crypto now than I was even 2 years ago, and during the height of that craziness. But I agree with you, and I'm real excited that you came on here. I mean, this was a good conversation, and I'm happy to have you on anytime if you got something interesting you want to share with my audience. Where can people find out more about you?
I think the easiest way is just to go to either truthraider.com. I got a website that just kind of shows the stuff I'm working on, or just go to Twitter at TruthRaiderHQ is where I'm the most active.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation immensely.
Hey, I appreciate it, Rob.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNealy program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcnealy.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.